In August of 2016, NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick sat on the bench during the playing of the national anthem to protest racial injustice and police brutality. Since this event, certain players from nearly every team in the NFL have sat, knelt, or locked arms during the playing of the anthem.
My name is Andrew Shue. I'm a politics and history major. I'm a senior here at St. Anselm College, and I'll be commissioning as a second lieutenant into the United States Army's infantry in May, so right before graduation.
Hello, I'm Michael Eklansotu, a senior computer science major and a former St. Anselm football player.
My name is Erin DeBacco. I work for the Granite State Organizing Project, managing their new membership initiative and the Active Bystander Program.
Hi, my name is Sean Connor. I'm a sophomore, and I'm a communications major and politics minor.
Hi, I'm Justin McDonald. I'm in the United States Army Infantry Specialist.
Okay. To many people, this is an appropriate way to protest and is their right to freedom of speech. But to others, this act is not only disrespecting the country, but is also disrespecting those who fight to keep it safe.
The significance of this protest occurring during the national anthem is important to note. The anthem has been played before sporting events since the 1860s and represents, for many people, the ideals of freedom and dignity that our nation was founded on.
Why is it significant that these active protests occurred specifically during the national anthem?
I think that it was significant that it occurred during the national anthem because that is a symbol for America and the government, and Colin Kaepernick did that specifically to show that against them. Not against the Army, which everyone thought it was against, but just against a corrupt government.
And why is it significant that these active protests occurred specifically during the national anthem?
Well, I think the anthem is one of the first things that happens during a football game. It gets a lot of media coverage by the press of the teams standing and doing what they do, as well as sometimes a famous singer will come in, so it's a pretty highly visible time that everyone is kind of doing the same thing, and it's not the game, so you're going to capture a little bit of something that's not entirely football at the moment.
This is not, however, the first time the national anthem has been protested. In 1968, U.S. Olympic athletes Tommie Smith and John Carlos raised their fist in a Black Power salute on the medal stand during the Star-Spangled Banner. As a result, they were thrown out of the Olympics. Similarly, Jackie Robinson took a stance in his 1972 autobiography stating, "As I write this 20 years later, I cannot stand and sing the national anthem. I cannot salute the flag. I know that I am a black man in a white world." In 1965, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights activists knelt in prayer in Selma, Alabama, after which over 250 protesters were arrested on a march to the Dallas County, Alabama courthouse to get fellow African Americans registered to vote.
The problem is that white America, and I don't mean all white Americans, but white America has never solidly committed itself on the question of racial justice.
2 years earlier, King wrote a letter from Birmingham jail which defends the strategy of nonviolent resistance to racism. He states that there are 4 steps to a nonviolent campaign: collection of the facts, negotiation, self-purification, and direct action, all of which the NFL protests complete. He stresses that direct action must be taken peacefully. King states, "The Negro has many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations. He has to get them out. If his repressed emotions do not come out in these nonviolent ways, they will come out in ominous expressions of violence. So I have not said to my people, 'Get rid of your discontent,' but I have tried to say that this normal and healthy discontent can be channeled through the creative outlet of nonviolent direct action."
So what would Martin Luther King say about the NFL protests? The discontent of the NFL protesters regarding racial injustices is being channeled through this nonviolent form of protest in a way that forces people to pay attention to the purpose of the movement. Martin Luther King would likely approve of this movement because it allows members of society to voice their opinions through civil disobedience. What do you think MLK would say about these protests?
I think that he would admire its clarity, its simplicity, its effectiveness, and Kaepernick's steadfastness.
There are a variety of key components of social movements that we see within the NFL protests. The protest itself addresses the social problem of racial injustice and police brutality against black individuals. More broadly, the NFL protests are an attempt to raise the issue of institutional racism based upon the intersection of the criminal justice system. The media is used along with powerful leadership to draw attention to this specific social movement. Colin Kaepernick was the powerful leader in this movement, but he also identifies with the powerless group in society as a person of color. Society's response to this very public movement promoted the protests beyond the NFL.
The collective action, or mobilization as a result of rational goals, was seen when people across sports teams, celebrities, and local athletes began kneeling in solidarity with the movement.
And as a football player, what did your coach think about the protests, and did you practice any form of protests?
My coach supported it 100%. One of our players tried to take a knee during a game, and it didn't go well. Someone from the audience, someone from St. Anselm spotted it, called it out immediately, and we heard about it after the game, and they shut it down. They said we couldn't protest. So that kind of angered me a little bit because they wanted to keep us silent about what was going on instead of
The approach to the NFL protests are seen in the sense of structural strain, since it is reactionary of police brutality, specifically the case of young black men being shot by police officers at a disproportionate rate. The NFL anthem protests can be categorized under New Social Movements theory, as one of the theoretic models that explains how and why social movements develop. The New Social Movements theory assumes that unequal power relations drive social change. This relates to the NFL protests since there is unequal power amongst police and people of color. That lack of equality serves as motivation for people of color to make social change. In order for this change to occur, that unequal power must be present and is clearly the case with the issue of police brutality.
Kaepernick has used many strategic means in order to turn this act into a successful movement, specifically logic of numbers. This form of protest relies on a large number of people to partake in the movement in order for it to have a greater chance at success. Since football is the most watched sports game in America, Kaepernick was able to reach the masses of American people. The national anthem protests also uses the logic of bearing witness. Kaepernick grew up in a suburban area where police brutality was not as prevalent as in inner cities. However, he is using his voice and power to stand with those who have fallen victim to police brutality. People hold varying opinions as to whether or not the NFL protests were the most strategic option for addressing the issue of police brutality against people of color.
And do you have any personal opinions about the NFL protests?
Yeah, I think that it's an important discussion that we need to have in our society. I'm not willing to say that one side is either wrong. I just happen to disagree with the way that they're doing it. I'm of the opinion that, for kneeling for something like the national anthem and in front of the flag, it's one of those things where it's not just the one issue that they're protesting. It kind of becomes something greater. And with something like the flag and the freedom that it represents to people, that's something that a lot of people have laid down their lives for and sacrificed so much for. So I feel like, it is an important issue and we should have those discussions. It just becomes disrespectful because of how broadly it represents things to other people. And where if you're going to have a protest like that, you should do it in a way that will be a little bit more considerate towards what people may have sensitivities to.
And how would you respond to someone who claimed this movement was un-American?
Well, then that person is themselves un-American because they're trying to defame or take away someone's right to exercise their free speech or, basically politically petition during a time that they feel would be high visibility for them to do so. I think that person may misconstrue what's being done as an act against the United States of America or maybe an act against the U.S. government when I think they're misreading the intention of those acts. And though we can't know everyone's intent, I feel like the movement was quite well organized. And if you listen to those people, they have a pretty clear political message that they want to get across. I don't think when they're kneeling, they're saying, oh, you know, we have to stop fighting all these wars. They're kind of worried about their own community and their own story, not so much what the U.S. government is doing elsewhere.
Yes. What are your thoughts on the actual protest itself?
Honestly, I think it's stupid. I think there's a better way to get a point across than kneeling during the national anthem. Doesn't bother me too much, but it's just dumb.
Okay, so you obviously being in the military, do you guys take it personally, per se, when people kneel for the national anthem, or do you just kind of brush it to the side?
In my opinion, it depends on the guy. Me, doesn't bother me that much, you know. I'll brush it to the side. You know, it is what it is. Freedom, United States of America. It's basically...
Yeah, so people have their right to protest.
They have their right to protest, and if they pick that way, so be it.
I will say that Kaepernick is one of my heroes.
Really, why?
Because he had a clear moral vision, because he made a decision that he did not know if he was going to get any kind of support behind it, and he did it anyway, and he held that position without inflicting harm on anyone else, but he didn't waver in his commitment, and through that process, he shifted people's understandings. And then he paid a personal cost and never felt bad for him, felt sorry for himself around it. And he also gave a lot of money to organizations that support black kids doing better in school, you know, business things. He made a point of putting money into the black community in ways that would help lift them up. So it wasn't just this gesture. And I think the man has an enormous amount of integrity and intelligence.
Okay. How would you respond if someone claimed that this act was un-American?
I would tell them, first of all, I would listen to them and see what they have to say first, and then I would have to explain why I think it is American, because everybody in society here is American, especially if you're a citizen, and no matter what color your skin is, you're American and you're a citizen here. So Colin Kaepernick and the people he stood for are all American. And I also found out that a veteran supported him on this. And a lot of people were going against it, saying that we were disrespecting the people who stood for our flag and fought for us and made it okay for us to do what we're doing in our everyday lives and made it safe in our lives. So if he had someone supporting him from the Army, I believe that it was very American, and he just was fighting for justice. And if people in the Army are fighting for justice and he's fighting for justice, then I think it's American.